Greetings everyone, here we are with another delightful video, and this time I'm going to do a quick little overview of Vecna, Eve of Ruin. Before I get into it really quickly, I will denote that as of the recording of this video, I'm at 499 subscribers. If you are not subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing. Go to my channel page and go to the video section and just scroll right down through it. I cover the basics of a lot of systems, and generally I try to make my channel so that it is more or less this is your basic introduction to this system. I'm going to show you the product a little bit and give you my quick thoughts on it, and you get to decide whether you want to really go in and invest in that system. I try to show as many different systems as possible, anything ranging from classic games from the 1970s all the way up to the 1920s and beyond. The stuff that's mainstream, like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Call of Cthulhu. And, oh, my Call of Cthulhu is not up here because I was actually prepping for a game and I have it on my other table. But anyways, I cover a variety of systems that are anywhere from very mainstream to very non-mainstream to stuff that only had a few years of its life and then was no longer supported. So there we go. As you can see, I got piles of stuff to still go through. At like 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to unbox this. That's mint. So anyways, let's start into Vecna, Eve of Ruin. This is what is a product between the very tail end of D&D Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition 2014 version or series, and just before release, just before the 2024 version of Dungeons & Dragons. Some people have started refer to the 2024 version as D&D 5.5, and some other people have started referring to it as D&D 5.24 or 5.25. I personally think of it as more like a 5.25 edition, but let's not get too far into that. We'll get to that in the future. This book, MSRP's for $60. It is an adventure from level 10 to level 20. It requires the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide to run it. The artwork is actually quite nice throughout the entire book. Full color. This is a decent binding book overall. My first problem, as you can see here, first and foremost, is that they don't use up the whole page, yet they use really small text here. However, they use two different tones of text for the table of contents, so you have clear delineation between the different chapters, so that's a good thing. It would have been nice if it was slightly bigger. You have a full page spread, which is typical for every beginning of the chapter of this book. You have a quick introduction. This adventure is largely focused around your party having a really serious incident that occurs. I do believe they died and spontaneously came back to life, and they try to jump through the multiverse from world to world and reality to reality to right wrongs and stop Vecna from resetting the entire universe in his image. He's trying to become the god of everything. It has a quick overview of all the major players that your characters are going to run into and interact with. You have your major items that your party is going to find and or try to utilize. Some nice tables and so forth. some simple tables denoting the CR of the various creatures and what chapter they appear in, and a few other things. The power of secrets, and so forth. Now, return from the never death graveyard. As I said before, your characters at the beginning of this apparently died and are somehow not dead. They have come back. And there's a series of cameos that occur throughout this entire book adventure of referencing various past video games and other stuff. It's a lot of video games and some adventures. It is important to note that there is a common pattern. A lot of game masters and dungeon map. Oh, there's a dungeon map and so forth. There are a few simple dungeon maps throughout the adventure. However, there's a basic simple structure that occurs through this adventure. There's usually a social section, a dungeon adventure traveling section, usually very small dungeons with some combat, and then you have a boss monster encounter that occurs at the end of the chapter. And then there might also be some social interactions between those points as your characters are traveling through the dungeon. So there you go. The artwork overall is fairly nice. There is some fudging of some details here and there. There's also some inconsistency in some art styles. A few different artists use a slightly different art style that immediately jumps out or is not being fitting with all the other art styles, but you know, it's alright. The general important point is that the adventure is fairly linear. It's a bunch of breadcrumbs stringing from one location to another, and there's a few events in each location, but it's not overly robust adventurous. If your party decides to wander to the right or the left, you suddenly have to start improvising and inventing a whole bunch of stuff for them. So each chapter is just the bare bones through and through. As I said before, there is pretty much a section where there's a social intersection in the chapter where the party interacts with some creatures or people. And then they go through like a area that goes into a conflict where they fight a bunch of creatures. A small dungeon. This is a prime example. And then they have a boss encounter at the end of that dungeon where they fight a creature. Big creature. And then at that point they collect a portion of the Rod of Seven Parts. And it's largely just a voyage around the universe to important locations of note in history, and little skirmishes and interactions between here and there. Overall, it's not terribly bad. There's typically almost a small dungeon for every chapter. There's some odd moments here and there where you're kind of like, oh yeah, they stuck this in here because it's popular. Or it's well known amongst the community that this is a thing. Like a link between Strahd and the Death House and so forth. But anyways, you get some nice variety of monsters. I'm going to flip all the way to the back. You get some nice variety of variants of monsters. You got some reprints of various creatures, but you also have some new creatures in here as well, such as the Black Rose Bearer, Blade Lieutenant, Blade Scouts, a Blaze Bear, a Bone Rock. Bone Rock is pretty cool. A Bothak for new creatures, a Dreadbark Dryad, a Death Wolf, a Digaloth, a Eyemonger, a False Lich, a granite juggernaut. Incidentally, there is some inconsistency in some depictions in the chapters and the creatures in the back. A Havacal, a Heartloid, and so forth. So you have a nice little variety of creatures in the back of the book to add on. A good chunk of them are higher CR creatures from that CR 15 to 25 range, which is always nice to get a few more extra creatures that are between that CR 10 to 25 range each added into your collection. So there's value in buying this adventure just so you get a few more creatures for your high-level adventures. You also get some rather noteworthy characters in here as well, like you got Silverhand's stats, Ariel Silverhand, and then you have the Cast the Betrayer's stats, as well as Lalt the Spider Queen stats, Lord Soth and Miska the Wolf Spider. And then you have a new version of Strahd, Master of the Death House, Tasha the Witch, and Tiamat, as well as Vecna here. There's no stat block for Tiamat. Vecna here, the Archlich. And then you have a map of your base is in the adventure. So overall, there's a nice collection of adventures. If your party is kind of the group of people who just follow the breadcrumbs and they enjoy that, this actually is pretty good overall. They can just shoot along. However, the fact that this is a fairly linear adventure, and I mean it's really linear, like only stuff that's in this adventure is really stuff related to this adventure and some cameos thrown in for flavor. So if your party is the type of party or players that like to just adventure off the edge and check out stuff and like hang out and ask people more questions, as a game master, you're going to have to start making a lot of homebrew and adding on other stuff around the areas. Yet, as many people have said, and I do agree, this adventure feels like there was like 20 to 50 pages that were pulled out of it and tossed aside somewhere that included more details and more stuff for the players to interact with, and encounters and more world components for each section of the chapters, but everything had to get trimmed down to fit into a given number of pages. Incidentally, the number of pages is 256. So there's pros and cons to being bare bones, and I do say sometimes I do like a bare bones adventure, particularly if it's written in a fashion that it is bare bones and you can actually ad lib onto it. You can just read through the adventure really fast, memorize is the core fundamentals, and then you just invent extra stuff to attach on. However, Wizards of the Coast has this weird, annoying tendency to make adventures that are fluffy but also simultaneously bare bones, and they also have stuff that just dead ends in the adventure. So you end up having to read through a whole lot of extra fluff stuff, find out that some of that fluff stuff is not of any value whatsoever, but also the fact that you don't entirely know when that happens. And there you go. This adventure, however, on that is very low on fluff stuff. So you could pretty much just read through this whole entire thing, do like I would do, and memorize the whole core story and the characters, and make sure you have a index of all the characters' names and basic character personality traits. And and then ad-lib everything else onto it. But some game masters truly want all that extra. There's extra stuff to do in the adventure, and then there's fluff stuff. I don't know who wants extra fluff stuff, but I do like having a whole lot of extra side adventures and extra things that could be involved with the characters. You know, extra group of characters in the book with their own little mini adventures, or stores and prices for items and stuff like that. Like, oh, there happens to be this set of stores in town or something like that, with their own range of items, so you kind of have a range of what would be acceptable in the floor. Otherwise, you end up with me giving out like very rare cursed items for our party at level 5 or something like that. But anyways, that was fun. But anyways, I do say that this is not a bad adventure or book that does need a whole bunch of work depending on your party. If your party is, as I said, literally the kind of party that just follows the breadcrumbs you give them, and you give them a consistent pace of breadcrumbs, this is not too bad. You're going to have to do some homebrewing and ad-libbing here and there to fill in the weird thinness of the sections of it. However, if you're the kind of person who has a party that likes to wander and adventure and interact heavily, and you really want to have a whole lot of extra meat in it, this is not so great. You're going to have to do a lot of work to bring that up to an acceptable level. Some people struggle with that. Some people, like me, just need the framework of that, and then they can just invent a billion things off of that in a snap. But anyways, I do say that this is sort of in that 3.5 star territory approximation. I have not run it, so I cannot give. This is, whenever I do an overview score, it is not a firm. This is absolute score for it. This is a, oh, I paged through it, I read chunks of it, I looked at the overall composition, I might have even looked at other people's videos. This is what I think it looks like overall kind of score. So there might be some unknown issues or more work that might need to be done, but it's sort of sitting in that it's okay. It's slightly better than okay territory. 3 stars is like okay. You move like 3 to 3.5. It's like, it's decent. It works. You can use it. You just have to do a little extra work, or depending on the level of how much your party wants to screw around with things. So, there you go. Please note, if you come to my channel and this is the first time, you can go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's always greatly appreciated, and I'm currently sitting at 499 subscribers. It would be nice to hit that 500 mark and take Sassy for a puppy walk through Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, the birthplace of Dungeons and Dragons. So there you go. Sassy enjoys her puppy walks. And then when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I will do a fresh unboxing of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition. This is from Fantasy Flight Games. This is completely intact, and this is literally a board game TTRPG. This is a thing that was popular in the early 2000s, right around the time of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. So that's a ridiculous error. And there's a whole bunch of crazy stuff. This system is a pain in the butt to come by intact because it has so much stuff in there. I swear, this inspired Wizards of the Coast to make Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition. But anyways, Sassy Walk at 500 subscribers. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition at 1,000. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel, share it to like Reddit or Facebook or Twitter/X or so forth, and see if any other people will jump in on that. I cover a whole variety of things. I'm going into the extra stuff. I will end up covering, say, like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, some OSR or OSR adjacent products like Kern, Starfinder 2nd Edition, Star Wars Edge of the Empire, which will also include Age of Rebellion and Force and Destiny. I also happen to have third-party Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition stuff, a pile of it right here to go through. Got Call of Cthulhu, Shadowrun 6th Edition, and many, many more things to go through. I also have TTRPGs like The Mutant Epoch and Hackmaster to go through as well, and many, many more. There's also the Dark Eye 5th Edition, which is not based on Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, but it's an entirely own system that's separated out. That's actually a very popular German TTRPG, and much, much more. So if you are the kind of person who enjoys just finding out about new, different TTRPGs and even old ones, so like Star Frontiers, feel free to subscribe. I keep trying to mix up the channel and keep a variety flowing through it all the time. Sometimes I take a pause for a few weeks to a month, but I'll get back onto it eventually. So there you go. Oh yeah, there's also Werewolf Apocalypse 5th Edition in my pile of things to cover as well. That's a big pile. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, magnificent month, and see you next time. Ciao.